Nice to be here again on this Tuesday morning, and Riyadh in Ageja. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to FCT Brief. Now, Nigeria's agriculture sector is once again at the center of national conversation, not just for food security, but for its growing potential as a major driver of exports, jobs, and industrial growth. From value addition to global market access, agro-processing is increasingly seen as the bridge between subsistence farming and sustainable economic diversification. Yet, despite abundant raw materials and rising global demand, Nigeria's agro-processing export industry continues to grapple with familiar challenges, infrastructure gaps, financing constraints, quality standards, and competitiveness in the international markets. As the country looks to expand non-oil exports, critical questions remain. How prepared is Nigeria to compete globally, and what reforms are needed to unlock the full value of agro-processing? And this morning on FCT Brief, we will be looking at the opportunities and bottlenecks shaping the sector. Joining us is Michael Adesola Adeoluwa, Group Managing Director of Azukin Noma Africa, who will share insights on Nigeria's agro-processing export landscape, investment prospects, and the road ahead for agricultural development. And it's nice to have you here this morning.
President, thank you so much for having me in the studio today.
President Tinubu, far away UAE, is about signing a comprehensive economic partnership agreement with the UAE, not oil, agric, and manufacturing, but our focus is agric. What do we stand to benefit when we relate with UAE in terms of agric, or better still, how should we reposition ourselves as a nation that has vast capacity in agricultural production?
All right, thank you so much for having me in the studio, and good morning, Nigeria. Right, it's a great day. It's a good day for Nigeria, and then kudos to the President, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, for being the leader that he is, to see that Nigerian agricultural and oil sector is on the world map. And what does Nigeria have to benefit? I can tell you for free that Nigeria is so blessed with a lot of resources, both human and raw material. But then the question should be, how do we add value? How do we see to it that we can tap into the vast export market and be able to attract foreign direct investment? And from this partnership and from this laudable signing that is currently going on in far away UAE, right, we would see that there would be a collaboration between Nigeria, West Africa, and the Arabian countries that has been a divide over the years. So, for instance, let's look at the mixed industry. There's a lot of demand for Nigerian beef in the Arabian countries and UAE, too, for instance. But what are the enabling environments? We don't have the right certification, Allah certification. We don't have the right framework to enable our meat to be able to cross the borders of Nigeria to the Arabian countries. And what are these? We don't have the right butchery, right? We don't have the right framework to ensure that not only just cut meat anyhow, right? Ensure that you follow international standards to ensure that this meat, right, can also be purchased at high value, and then at the end of the day, it will cascade down to our farmers, to the headers, and at the end of the day, we are going to make a lot of wealth and prosperity for Nigeria. Away from that, we cannot overemphasize the need for technology transfer between the developed countries and Nigeria as a developing country. So by the time we are able to cascade down this technology and localize it, we would see a transformation, and we'll see our farmers moving from rag to riches, and at the end of the day, Nigeria will be a better place for it.
Good thought. I like what you said about the beef industry and all that. I lived in Lagos for a while, and I noticed that there was a time there was this revolution in Lagos that they decided, look, you can no longer transport meat on motorbikes or on rickety vehicles, and they had customized a type of vehicles with refrigerating capacity and all that. I was in a particular state in the middle belt, just over crossing over into the new year, and I just saw meat being transported on motorbikes. Now we're talking about standardization. Which organizations in Nigeria are responsible for this standardization? And what can we begin to do differently so that it is not just a talk show? We signed series of agreements. And how do we make these agreements a cash crop for Nigeria so that at the end of the day, when we look back 1 year after, we will say it was a good deal in UAE because the collaboration has earned us so much, moving just beyond normal farming. We now have the secondary production value chain in Nigeria.
Yeah, but permit me to say that our abattoirs are in deplorable situations, right?
Across the country.
Across the country, right? And then we have to move away from traditional ways of doing things to internationally acceptable mediums, right? Okay, we have SON, we have NAFDAC, and also we have the leaders in the market that are supposed to enable that there are rules and regulations that must be followed through. Not just lip service, not just putting it on paper, but ensuring that we follow through with all the laid down rules and regulations to see to it that we are consuming healthy and we are consuming nutritious food. But away from that, we need to also have private sector, right, come into the space looking at the enormous opportunities in the sector right now with what our president is doing in UAE. We are not only going to leave it to the abattoirs alone, we have to now have institutionalized and internationally certified abattoirs that can process this meat, package it, and ensure that we also keep the cold chain to ensure that by the time they get to the international market, we can get value. Right now, for instance, we are consuming our leather industry with the pomo. There's a lot that can be processed, that we can process the bones into, that will create a lot of foreign direct investment. But however, I must also give it to the raw material development research, the raw material development and research council, right? What a wonderful job they've done to see to it that the raw material in Nigeria can at least have minimum of 30% value addition to ensure that we can move away from just exporting raw material and adding value and see to that we change the lot of Nigeria and then Nigeria.
Was that just a policy statement or there are practical steps that are evident that we are taking? I'd like you to talk about the practical steps that have been taken about the 35% value addition in line with, for instance, the Ministry of Livestock. That was one of the noble creations of this administration. And if that is handled very well, how do you think the Livestock Ministry can drive this revolution? Still talking about the aspect of the meat production. How do you think the livestock industry can drive this revolution we're talking about?
Yes, there's no gainsaying that we have to move from these traditional headers. We're moving cows and then doing open grazing, right? Before the truth of the matter is the quality of the meat also goes a long way in what they eat, how they are stressed, and all of that. And if you go to Europe and you go to Asia, you see that they have developed their livestock industry to international standard. It's not something we cannot do in the country, but however, there is value for tender meat, right? You don't have to pull out the meat before your teeth and all of that can go out. Those are not meats that are going to be accepted on the international standard. However, right, is a marathon, not a sprint. We can try as much as possible to close the gap. And with the Ministry of Livestock and what they are doing there, I can assure you that Nigeria is on is closer to ensuring that our teething problems now can be a thing of the past, and then we can continue to explore.
I asked that because there was a time we have these agro-borrowers stuff and all that. We've had series of interventions by government, previous governments, and it's like we didn't continue with those things, and you cannot really place and say, see, this is what we have gained as a nation. And in research, I realized that, for instance, in Brazil, you have these agro-industrial clusters that Brazil built and all that. Now, some persons will say that why do government needs to have like this the ranches? Why should government really build ranches? I mean, this is what the research is telling us, that in Brazil, you have those pioneered by government, and they build clusters and bring in every other critical aspect into it, into like a one-stop shop. So is it out of place if we have it in Nigeria, these clusters built as maybe ranches by government, and you bring in investors so that we begin to jumpstart this revolution we're talking about?
Yeah, so thank you so much. Fantastic question. If you look at the plan, the 10-year plan that was just put forward by the RMRDC, right, which gives a framework for value addition in the next 10 years. Yes. It has already been passed at the green and red chambers, awaiting the assent of the president, right? That is an exhaustive document showing the steps that Nigeria needs to take to ensure that we can extract value from our raw materials and see to it that Nigeria becomes a net exporter of a value-added agricultural product. What am I saying in essence is this. If we look at the Industrial Revolution in the mid-18th century and the early 19th century, we will see that the colonies were set up for extraction. They were just extracting raw materials, adding value there and still bringing it back to Nigeria. But then, let's look at Chile, let's look at Improper, let's look at India and South Africa. They have been able to add value and extract more value from their raw material that they are exporting, and making sure that they are now moving from farm to fork to table food right now. What does Nigeria need to do? We need to put the right policies in place, and we also have to put the enabling infrastructure, right? And also now back it up with the required financial support with development finance. If we follow through all these 3 steps, we will see to it that not only are we going to catalyze the agricultural growth in Nigeria, we are going to create credible jobs that Nigerians are going to benefit from, and at the end of the day, Nigeria will be in a better place for it.
Oh, okay, thank you so much for that conversation. We'll just quickly go on a break now, and when we come back, we'll still be here to dig deeper into the agro-processing sector. Welcome back. Now, if you're just joining us, we've been speaking about agriculture, and the GMD of Adesola is here to give insights into what we need to do as a nation to push this sector forward. We left off talking about what practical steps Nigeria should take. I also know that Nigeria, we've attracted so much private investment in the oil sector. How can we attract such massive investment in agriculture so that we go beyond just talking about let's push for the agri sector, because it has capacity to employ a huge number of Nigerians just beyond food production and all that. But some persons actually say that are we really ready to move beyond just making agriculture as a social investment, to make it a real business? Because a lot of time we think that agriculture is just a social investment.
Okay, thank you so much. So we need to move away from seeing farming as a way of life and seeing farming as a business, right? When we see it as a business, our thinking, our mind would change, and there will be a paradigm shift. What am I saying in essence is this, that there are other workable solutions that we can easily adopt. And I will still put it on to consistent policy, right? Policy will set the direction, is the Bible that guides everybody. Yeah. When the policy is right, and then you also back it up with the right infrastructure. What happened to the textiles in the Northwest? What killed it? Inadequate infrastructure, lights, and all of these things. I've seen that. We've done it before. At least we've seen the pyramids of groundnut and all of that. But what did we do? What was the next level we did not do? Was now to start adding value and creating enable infrastructure like light, road, and the right framework and policies to ensure that we can now cascade from just raw material and then cascade to value addition. So what can we do right now is to see to it that right now in the country of today, in Nigeria, private sector has to be leading some of these interventions to see continuity and sustainability. However, some of the inhibiting factors is the cost of funding in Nigeria. We cannot still overemphasize the importance of getting the right money at the right condition at the right time, because all of this must go hand in hand. If the policy framework is there and the government does not also using the developmental finance aspect of it to also drive growth, a lot of a positive outlook that we're supposed to bring out of that is not going to work. So now everybody has to come together from the policy angle, from the development finance and private sector, and see so that we can drive and change the narrative and ensure that not only just 30%, this is just the first step of it. We need to move from 30% to 50 to 60 and see to it that we are not undercutting ourselves and underpaying our farmers, and the economy at the end of the day is going to bleed for it.
I'd like us to go into something, the land tenure system.
Fantastic.
How well can reforming the land tenure system in Nigeria revolutionize large-scale agro-processing? Take it side by side the fact that in a lot of villages now, the huge concentration is on real estates. What should naturally be for farmland are being sold for real estate, and you have real estate entrepreneurs going into that. How can the government switch this move towards just real estate to ensure that certain lands in the interiors are preserved for agric? So at the end of the day, we don't sell all our rich arable lands because of real estate, money coming from real estate. So how can the government step in land tenure reform?
All right, thank you so much. Fantastic question. It will interest you that the Land Use Act of 1978 caused a lot of land fragmentation that has inhibited Nigeria from moving from small, older farmers to large-scale farming. However, it will interest you that the government of the day, in their wisdom, has set up now the National Agricultural Land Development Authority, which their role or their goal is to be able to open 10 million hectares of land in the next 10 years, and under the auspices of Segun Adebayo, right? What they've been able to do is to identify large land within the 36 states and the FCT, right? To now see to it that they can now open those lands, put infrastructure, right? And also now embed the rural communities into this land, and it's called Renewed Hope Mega Farming Estates. And this is going to be a game changer that's going to catalyze and revolutionize the way agriculture is being seen. And what are they doing differently? The government here is now being the first risk taker, opening the land, putting infrastructure, and by so creating credible jobs within those rural communities. And away from that also, we are going to be solving rural-urban migration by ensuring that we're creating infrastructure. But what am I saying in essence is this: yes, it's ongoing, and what we can just encourage more youth in Nigeria is that they need to participate, look at all the opportunities within the sector, and be able to also harness it, and at the end of the day, see agriculture not just as subsistence, but as
now you've mentioned two things. The NALDA opening about 10 million hectares of farmland. Yes. But in the Land Use Act, land is still the exclusive preserve of the state government.
Yes.
This is a federal initiative.
Yes.
How well has the various state governments, because a lot of time we concentrate on the federal government. Federal government has no land. The land belongs to the states. Yeah. Now, so no matter the reform, the policy you bring in that's a federal policy, if you don't have the real buy-in by the state government, it's not going to go too far. So do we presently have the state government buying into it? Then the second aspect, you said the young people. Why would a young man who just graduated, who left school, go back to the village to cultivate lands when the various state governments have refused to provide electricity, access road, the minimum things people need to make life worth living in the interiors for them? So you keep having this rural-urban migration. So how can we, beyond just the talk show, switch this so that when I graduate, for instance, from the university, I will be attracted to the village to farm? Because there are basic things I would naturally want to get in the city. I can get it in my village.
Thank you so much for that question. Let me bring it home. What is Azikinoma doing differently, right? And we are doing the program called Catch Them Young, right? So now we have looked at university in Nigeria, University of Ilorin, FUNAB, Abeokuta, ABU, and a host of others. What are we doing differently is that we are going to those schools, and then we are discussing with the head of departments in agriculture and all of that, so that from 100 to 100 level, from some of these lands that the schools have and the laboring communities. We are going there to tell them, okay, fine, we have 100 hectares of land here, we have 500 hectares of land. What you just need is just to show up. We are going to provide you with the seeds, with the fertilizer, training, capacity building, and also, most importantly, guaranteed offtake. And all of this we are doing in connections with the schools and some of the land that NAUDA is providing for us. So with this, we're just saying that come and practicalize what you're learning in school. And by this, we are also extending it beyond the schools. We are partnering with NYSC so that even when they finish and they get posted to any state within Nigeria, we already have land there where they just need to cascade and then also replicate what they've been able to learn in school and also continue it. And I tell people, I'm a young person like you. And if you see what Adesola has been able to do in about a decade, it tells you that there is credible jobs, there's money to be made, and Nigerian youth should not leave money on the table.
There's so much money to be made. Yes. I remember in the 70s and in those days we had the granite pyramids, we have the cocoa, we have the oil palm plantation, and those were majorly into primary production. Now we're talking about agro-processing.
Yes, please.
How do we get, going back to that same issue, we have the 36 states and the FCT. We have the regional development commissions, the 6 regional development commissions. How can they begin to drive this initiative of processing so that it's not just about a granite pyramid? We should rather have several processing facilities so that as they come from the farm, we supply the industries and all that, so that it's not just the pyramid, we're looking at the high pyramid, but we're looking at the industries that we even employ a higher number of people.
So thank you. So the initiative is very simple, right? Rome was not built in a day. However, how can we create modular processing facilities across the rural communities? It's not rocket science, right? When we create modular value addition centers within these rural communities, they will not be stressed or forced to now want to take their raw material to open market. However, all these modular processing facilities can be a lease and can be as pay as you go. So we are forming SPVs with the agencies, with the government and the rural communities, so that the rural communities can also have a skin in the game. Because by the time we have these modular processing facilities that can add value to maize, add value to cocoa, add value to cashew, add value to sesame seed and all of that, we are going to be able to create more than 5 million jobs annually, and in the next 10 years we'll create 50 million jobs. And with this, it's going to see that the lot of Nigeria and the space is going to be transformed. So now, what do we really need? We cannot expect a rural dweller to be able to afford some of these machineries and mechanization. So what are the platforms with which they can access pocket-friendly funding to be able to now set up these modular processing factories across the length? But okay, look at Benue, for instance. A lot of mangoes are rotting away. A lot of tomatoes are rotting away. The post-harvest loss is alarming.
Huge.
It's alarming. So how can we put cold chain that can be on the pay-as-you-go? How can we put modular processing, and rather than thinking that manna is going to fall from heaven, we have to be able to create African solutions to African problems. And I can tell you that we have the right requisite knowledge, we have the right requisite manpower. We just need to be able to wake ourselves from slumber and see to it that we revolutionize agricultural exporting Nigeria.
Now we talk so much about electric vehicles and all that, and we forgot that the immediate challenge we have is how to ensure that the rural community is taken care of so that it can boost our food supply and also boost our export. What incentive would a businessman need to massively invest in agriculture? There was a time there is this tax holiday given to businessmen, and sometimes government will say, okay, you construct XYZ road and you get certain incentive from government. How can such ideas and policies be channeled towards agriculture to attract the private sector, because the next stage of the revolution will not be driven by government. It should be private sector driven. So what are those things that can be on ground to have investment from the private sector?
Thank you. Fantastic. From what I said, the right money, 3 hours, the right money at the right condition at the right time, right? We need patient capital, and then we need long-term financing. Without long-term financing, for instance, if you go to PFIs in Nigeria, they are going to say, about 35 to 40%, and then you're expected to pay back in a year. How can that lead us to where we need to be? So also, development finance has been seen all over the world to catalyze economic growth and continuity. So now, private sector will always go where the money is, right? Because they are investing and they are putting the skin in the game. However, when the right policy is there, the right finance is there, and infrastructure. For instance, Nigeria is still doing terribly bad in terms of power generation, because we need power to be able to power these industries. And whether renewable and using renewable energy or using the existing platform that we have, if light does not get to rural communities, for instance, Dawano market in Kano is the biggest grain market in the whole of West Africa. There is no light. So how do you expect value addition? How do you expect them to revolutionize those spaces? So these are some of the teething problems, and also policy somersault. For instance, I'm an advocate for local raw material for local markets. The importation of food is not also helping the growth of the economic sector, because by the time you're bringing imported food to come and compete with local farmers, you are going to kill the sector before you even say Jack Robinson. So what do we need to do? We need to be able to bring down our cost of production across what is very high. How do we bring down the cost of production, enable and support smallholder farmers, and ensure that we only subscribe to local primary production growth, local raw materials, versus importing, and ensuring that we don't kill our farming activities at the end of the day.
Thank you so much for this conversation, helping us to understand how to bridge the gap between primary production and secondary production. Now, that is all we can take on this particular edition of FCT Brief. Now, I return you to our colleague in Lagos for the rest part of this particular program.
All right. Thank you so much, Ashomomo. Quite a great conversation there. Thank you.